This week, we're talking about Judas Iscariot. Let's pour some coffee on that. Hey guys, this is Father Brad Doyle, and you are watching Coffee Talk, where we drink coffee and talk about Jesus. Judas Iscariot. I had a thought the other day. I have not met a Judas. It's probably a good thing. I think in canon law, you can name your child anything that doesn't go against Christian mystery. I think it's worded. Basically, a non-Christian name, or it's against Christ. And I don't know if I'd baptize a Judas. Maybe Jude Maccabeus, Judah. That'd be cool. But no one really wants to name their kid Judas. Why? Because Judas has gotten a bad rap. Let's talk about who Judas is and a controversial statement that Jesus made. It had better for him not to be born. First, who is Judas? He was one of the apostles. We can't forget this. And that means one out of the first 12 betrayed him. It means one out of the first 12 was a scoundrel. That means there was a bishop from the very beginning that did not fulfill his mission, did not continue in his path and his walk with the Lord. He had every opportunity to do what he needed to do and what he was called to do, and yet he rejected Christ, and he did not serve the people of God, and he failed in his mission. So we shouldn't be surprised if today we have bishops and priests and leaders in the church and even lay faithful who fail in their mission. This reality of human brokenness was from the beginning of the church, right from the beginning. Even one of the ones Jesus chose himself failed him. Secondly, he was a thief. Scripture specifically names this and calls him out on this. It's in the Gospel of John, chapter 12. This is when Mary of Bethany takes this expensive oil and cracks the vase and pours it on Jesus' feet and anoints him. And Judas says, we could have sold for 300 denarii and given to the poor. So a denarii is like a day's wage in Jerusalem at the time, or in Israel at the time. And so 300 days' wages, almost a year's worth of wages. We could have sold that oil. And he says, given to the poor. This is what verse 6 says. This he said, not that he cared for the poor, but because he was a thief. And as he had the money box, he used to take what was put into it. So it's clear from Scripture, Judas was a thief. He was using his place as an apostle, using his place of authority to serve himself. He didn't care about the poor. He didn't care about the things that he portrayed that he cared about. He was a thief and was dipping his hand in the money basket. Thirdly, Judas left Mass early. You've probably heard this before. Also called the Judas Shuffle. The first Mass was the Last Supper, which is kind of funny, but that was the first Mass. Jesus gave to the apostles what we do now, which is he took bread, he took wine, he said the words of consecration, this is my body, this is my blood. He gave it to them, and that's the first time people receive communion. And it says in Scripture that Judas dips the morsel, so we call that intinction, the way of receiving the Eucharist, where a priest will dip the host in the precious blood and then place it on your tongue. You can still do that, and we do that often in the church. He dipped the morsel, and he received the Eucharist. And then he jet. He was the first to leave Mass early. You don't want to be like Judas? Come on. Don't leave Mass early. I'm looking at you, Vashri. Back row, 4 o'clock, p.m. Mass. Fourthly, is that a word, fourthly? And this is controversial. I had never heard this, but he didn't leave early enough. So he left Mass early, but he didn't leave early enough. Again, I'm going to go to Benedict XVI, Pope Benedict XVI, a Wednesday audience he gave about the apostles. He was specifically talking about Judas. He says this: Judas could have left as many disciples did. Indeed, he should have left had he been honest. Instead, he stayed with Jesus not out of faith, not out of love, but with the secret desire of taking revenge against the master. Why? Because Judas felt betrayed by Jesus and decided to turn to betray him. Judas was a zealot. He wanted a winning Messiah, one who would lead a revolt against the Romans. However, Jesus did not live up to these expectations. The problem is that Judas did not leave, and his fault is that of falsehood, which is the mark of the devil. For this reason, Jesus told the 12, "Yet is not one of you a devil?" That's from John chapter 6. An interesting point by Pope Benedict. He says he should have left earlier when he knew he didn't believe, when he knew he wasn't a disciple, when he knew he wasn't going to follow the Lord, and he was just there dipping his hands in the money basket, using his position to usurp the church and to undermine the church and to undermine Christ. In John chapter 6, whenever Jesus says, "My body is true food, my blood is true drink," he gives the Eucharistic teaching about the Eucharist. And many people left. It's John chapter 6, verse 666. And it says, many disciples left him. That's not, I don't want people to leave Jesus. I want people to follow him. But at least they were being honest with themselves. At least they were like, I cannot live up to this. This is not what I believe, so I'm going to leave. And so I think Pope Benedict in this audience is talking to people in the church, people with authority who are undermining the church, who should have left, who should not use their authority to bring down the church or their scandals to bring down the church. And they should bow out and leave a little earlier than that. And finally, we're going to talk about that controversial point or part of Scripture where it says, it is better that he had not been born. It is true that Jesus does say this about the one who would betray him. Now, a lot of people have said, this doesn't sound pro-life. Like, isn't existence better than non-existence? And even though in God's providence he knew what was going to happen, it was still Judas's free choice. And so he could have chosen rightly. He could have chosen not to betray Jesus. He could have. He had free will. So doesn't this go against our understanding of being pro-life? Existence is better than non-existence. I would say that my approach, and this is my approach, is that Jesus is not trying to make a philosophical statement about existence and non-existence. A lot of times in Scripture, Jesus uses what's called hyperbole. It's making a point emphatically, sometimes to an extreme. Right? You're not following me unless you hate your father and mother and your brothers and turn from them. He doesn't really mean that every disciple should hate their father and mother. He means that I need to be number one. Well, it's a hyperbolic way of talking. And I think in a similar way, he's using this. He's using this phrase to make a point. And the point is this, in the positive way of putting it, Leon Bloy said this: the only great tragedy in the world is to not become a saint. To not be a saint, to turn from the Lord in mortal sin, to reject God is so tragic. And he uses this hyperbole, a bit better that he not be born. He's not making a philosophical statement about existence and non-existence. He's saying that he wants all of us to become saints. He wants all of us to be in union with him. And when we turn and reject him, it's like we're dying. Our soul is dying, becoming incapable of love. That's what Jesus means. He wants all of us, even Judas, even the people that we think are the worst and the most heinous in the world, like they can always turn back. And Judas's great ending sin, his final sin, was not of betraying Jesus. It wasn't of stealing the money. It wasn't of selling him out and for those pieces of silver. His final sin was one of despair, not believing in God's mercy, not coming back. See, there's a difference between Judas and Peter, and it's just that. Both Peter and Judas betrayed Jesus. Peter denies him. He turns away. He wasn't with him in the end. Judas turns him in. Wasn't with him in the end. But Peter was able to encounter the Lord and receive mercy and come back and become the first pope and a saint and die hanging upside down on the cross, a martyr. And Judas could not receive mercy. He refused to receive mercy. And he despaired. That's the difference between Peter and Judas.